Hey, let's stay connected. Subscribe. My name is Daniel Brooks, and I never thought I'd live long enough to be treated like furniture at my own daughter's wedding. You know, the kind of object, necessary to hold the room together, but unsightly enough to be pushed to the side, hidden behind a tablecloth or curtain. That was me. A man of 67, trimmed beard, steady hands that once knew the weight of music. Hands no one here wanted to see. It was Boston in late October. The leaves along Commonwealth Avenue had turned the color of rusted brass, and the Charles River carried a shimmer so bright it hurt to look at. I told myself, walking toward the hall that morning, that maybe this day would heal the thin scar between my daughter and me. Maybe she'd look at me not as a relic from another life, but as her father imperfect, yes, but hers. Instead, she took me aside near the coat check, her veil brushing my cheek like cold lace, and whispered words that still gnaw at me in the dark. "Dad, could you sit behind that column? Please, I don't want anyone to notice." Notice what? My thinning hair? My thrift store suit? Or the simple fact that I exist? I laughed softly, a habit I picked up years ago when cornered. Behind the column? That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? But her eyes blue, like her mother's, didn't blink. She wanted me tucked away, hidden. And so I walked into that grand hall, chandeliers blazing, polished marble floor reflecting every bouquet and shoe heel, and I saw it, the column. A massive thing of stone, chipped near the base, its cracks patched clumsily with plaster. The place for me. I sat, and in sitting, I felt something unravel inside me. Now, I should tell you silence has always been my specialty. My ex-wife used to say I could dissolve into wallpaper if I tried. At first, she meant it sweetly, calling me her quiet rock. Later, she meant it cruelly, as though my stillness was proof of cowardice. Maybe she was right. I let her diminish me. I let years slide by in which I became smaller, dimmer, a man who could slip behind a column without protest. But as I lowered myself into that chair, as laughter and the clink of glasses swirled around me, I thought, have I really become this invisible? Or have I let myself? I looked at my hands resting on my lap. They twitched, as they often do when I'm nervous. Old habits. My fingers still remember patterns most people never knew I carried. Once, long ago, they danced across ivory keys until dawn, in smoky Chicago bars where applause was the only currency that mattered. But I buried that life. My daughter never saw it. To her, I was the man who paid bills late, who couldn't keep her mother happy, who ended up alone in a one-bedroom apartment with creaking pipes. What would she say if she knew the truth of those fingers? That behind the silence there had always been a sound, waiting, aching to return. The ceremony began. From my post behind the stone pillar, I could see only slivers. The bride's veil catching sunlight. The officiant's lips moving like a muted television. The shimmer of glasses raised by strangers. Everyone looked forward. No one looked back. A waiter nearly stumbled over me as he carried a tray of champagne. "Oh, sorry, sir." "Didn't see you there. Didn't see me." Isn't that the cruelest sentence in the English language? I swallowed it down, the way I've swallowed so many small deaths, and forced a smile. But something inside me stirred. Maybe it was the music from the hired quartet suite, polished, lifeless. The violin hit a note just flat enough to make my skin prickle. I clenched my fists, and in that moment, the column no longer felt like stone. It felt like a mirror, showing me what I had allowed myself to become. Solid, supporting, unseen. And I thought, not this time. When the vows ended and applause rose like a tide, I stood not high, not dramatically, just enough to breathe. I told myself I'd only stretch my legs. But my eyes caught something across the room. An upright piano shoved against the far wall, draped with a lace runner and flowers, as though it were no more than decoration. I froze. My pulse thudded against my ribs. That piano, it might as well have been calling me by name. I told myself I'd stay put, that I'd be polite, invisible, the way they wanted. But my eyes wouldn't let go of that piano. It sat there like a secret I had tried to bury under years of silence-polished mahogany dulled with scratches. Its lid closed, the brass pedals tarnished to green. Most guests probably thought of it as a prop, something to fill space, like me behind my column. But I knew better. You ever feel an object calling you back to yourself? That's what it was. The air seemed to shift around it, like the hall chandeliers suddenly dimmed and the only light left came from that corner. My fingertips brushed against my thigh, drumming patterns no one else noticed. I hadn't played in public since 1982, Chicago, a club called the Blue Lantern, long since boarded up. I was 24, full of cheap whiskey and foolishness, and I played a ballad so raw the room fell into silence. The owner told me, "Kid, you've got something. Don't lose it." But I did. I lost it in mortgage, in night shifts, in arguments with a wife who couldn't forgive me for dreaming. Now here I was, an old man at his daughter's wedding, haunted by the ghost of that music. During the reception, voices swirled like smoke. The groom's relatives' slick hair, manicured nails spoke of hedge funds and vacation homes. My daughter smiled tightly at their jokes, her eyes darting everywhere except toward me. Once, she caught my gaze, and I raised my glass to her. She looked away as though I were a stranger. "Who's that?" I overheard one of the groom's uncles ask. "The bride's father," someone whispered back. Then a pause, followed by a chuckle. "Doesn't look like much. Doesn't look like much." I tell you, those words sting more than open cruelty. They strip you clean. I wanted to stand and shout. I raised her. I bled for her. I worked nights when my body wanted to break just so she could wear new shoes to school, but my voice caught in my throat. Old habits. Silence has teeth, and mine had bitten deep. The band struck up another tune, something soulless, a caricature of jazz. They played the notes, but not the spaces between them, the ache, the longing, and that's what matters most, the spaces. I turned toward the piano again. Do you know what fear feels like at my age? It's not the fear of failing anymore. You've failed enough times to grow numb to that. It's the fear that maybe you've been invisible so long that even if you shouted, even if you roared, no one would care, that your life has already been decided. Still, my feet began to move. Not forward, not yet, but restless under the table. My hands flexed in my lap, as if they were remembering something on their own. A voice startled me. "Sir, can I get you something? Wine? Whiskey?" It was the waiter again, the same one who almost tripped over me. His tray rattled slightly in his hands, but his eyes softened when he looked at me. Maybe he was the only one in the room who actually saw me. "No, thank you," I said. But then, almost whispering, I asked, "Does that piano work?" He glanced over his shoulder. "The one in the corner? Haven't seen anyone touch it, but it looks fine." My throat tightened. "Looks fine." The boy lingered, curious, then moved on, and I sat there, heart hammering like it hadn't in years. Across the hall, the groom raised a glass. "To family," he said, "to my new father-in-law." A man of few words. The room laughed politely. My daughter's cheeks reddened. She didn't defend me. She didn't even look my way. I smiled, but inside I was crumbling. I had become the joke, the column, always the column. But you know what? Even a column cracks if the pressure is too much. I rose slowly, as though only stretching my legs. No one noticed. That's the privilege of invisibility. You can move without drawing eyes. Step by step, I drifted toward the piano, each footfall louder in my head than the chatter and clinking glasses. When I reached it, I rested my hand on the lid. The wood was cool, faintly sticky with polish. My reflection stared back at me in the glossy surface holder, wrinkled but still me. And then, without permission, my fingers traced a chord in the air, not touching the keys, just hovering above. The old pattern, the one I played the night my daughter was born. My chest ached, my palms trembled. I could hear the music inside me, pushing against my ribs, demanding to be released. But I hesitated, because what if I played and they still didn't see me? I stood there with my hand on the lid of that piano, as if it were the door to another life. And maybe it was. A door I'd bolted shut decades ago. My reflection in the polished wood looked back at me like a stranger asking, "Well, are you going to die invisible, or will you show them who you are?" I heard laughter ripple behind me, the groom's family tossing jokes like coins into a fountain. None landed my way. My daughter's voice drifted faintly across the room, high and brittle, the way she always laughed when she was trying too hard. That sound, God, it split me. I remembered when she was 5, standing on a chair beside me in our kitchen in Chicago, flour on her cheeks, giggling as she pressed dough with tiny fists. I had hummed to her then, a melody soft and simple, something I later built into a full song. She used to call it Daddy's tune. She doesn't remember now. Or maybe she chooses not to. And I thought, if I don't play it tonight, it dies with me. So I did what I hadn't done in 40 years. I pulled out the bench. It scraped against the marble with a groan loud enough to cut through the chatter. Heads turned. A few guests frowned, annoyed. Someone whispered, "What's he doing?" I sat. My back straightened as though it remembered how this posture once felt natural. My fingers hovered above the keys, trembling, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything pressing behind them. Regret, silence, lost years. Then I pressed a single note. Middle C. It rang out sharp and lonely. The conversations faltered. The violinist from the hired band lowered her bow. My daughter froze, veil trembling. I pressed another note, then another. And before I knew it, I was playing. It wasn't just any song. It was her song. The one I wrote the night she was born. When I sat by the hospital window, watching the city lights blur like fireflies. A piece built from wonder and exhaustion and the terrifying joy of becoming a father. My fingers stumbled at first, rusty after decades of neglect, but then muscle memory took over. The melody poured out like water breaking a dam. Each chord swelled with years of swallowed words. Each run carried the apology I never managed to speak, the pride I never knew how to show. The room went silent. Forks hovered in midair. Guests leaned forward, brows furrowed, as if trying to place the tune. And my daughter's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears. She remembered. The groom shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his friends as though wondering whether to laugh it off. But no one laughed, not anymore, because the music had shifted the air. Do you know that feeling? When a room breathes with you? When even the chandeliers seemed to pulse in rhythm. That's what it was. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a burden or a joke. I was a man filling the hall with something no one else could give. The notes swelled higher, brighter, then softer, more fragile, almost breaking. My vision blurred, but my hands kept moving, finding their way like they always had. I thought of nights lugging boxes in warehouses, my back screaming, while that song hummed in my head like a stubborn ember. I thought of arguments with my ex-wife, her voice sharp as glass, telling me I was a dreamer, useless, a failure. I thought of the countless evenings alone, staring at walls, too afraid to play because it hurt too much to remember what I'd lost. And I realized I hadn't been invisible because others made me so. I had erased myself, one silent compromise at a time, but not tonight. The final chord lingered in the air, vibrating against the walls, filling every corner, including the shadowed space behind the column where they tried to hide me. And then came silence, a heavy, breathless silence. For one terrifying second, I thought they would resume their chatter, dismiss me as a silly old man making noise. But then applause. It started soft, a smattering of claps. Then it grew, swelling until the hall roared with people stood. Guests I had never met were shouting bravo. The band lowered their instruments, nodding in respect. Even the groom's smug uncle had tears glistening on his cheeks. And my daughter stumbled forward, veil slipping, and threw her arms around me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. Her body shook with sobs. "Daddy," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." I closed my eyes, letting her cry against me. For once, I didn't rush to comfort her, didn't minimize myself. I simply existed, solid and undeniable. The groom looked pale, shifting in his expensive shoes. He forced a smile, but it cracked at the edges, because in that moment, the room wasn't his. It wasn't even my daughter's. It was mine. The old man behind the column had become the center, and everyone saw it. Later, when the music resumed and guests returned to their plates, people came up to me, asking about my past, my playing, my life. I gave them only fragments. The truth was too heavy to lay bare in one night, but it didn't matter. The point had been made. I was no longer furniture, no longer a burden to hide. That night, walking back to my apartment, the cold Boston air cutting my cheeks, I felt taller than I had in decades. Not because of applause, or even because my daughter finally held me as she once did when she was small, but because I had reclaimed myself. Do you understand? The revenge wasn't humiliating anyone else. It wasn't proving the groom wrong or silencing whispers. The revenge was simply refusing to be erased, forcing the world to hear me one more time. And if you ever find yourself tucked behind a column, forgotten, made small, remember me. Remember the sound of a single note breaking silence. Play it and make them listen. The applause faded, but the tremor in my hands didn't. Maybe you thought that would be the end. Old man plays one song. Room weeps. Redemption achieved. If life were tidy, yes. But life has a taste for the bitter peel under the sweet. And some people cannot stand it when the center of the room shifts away from them. They yank it back. Impressive, Daniel, the groom said, voice stretched thin as a violin string tuned too tight. Really touching. His smile was wide enough to show Money had straightened his teeth. You know, my boss just got here. I should introduce you. There it was. That word boss, dropped like a coin in a jar to remind everyone who paid whom. A skitter of whispers. A drift of cologne. A man with a winter tan and a navy suit the color of unslept oceans threaded toward us through the clusters of tables. He walked like he expected rooms to part. Some rooms do. Mr. Harrow, the groom said. Sir, this is Daniel Brooks, the father of the bride. He added, like a punchline. Unemployed, but apparently not untalented. The old joke, polished for a second telling. He looked at me with a dare in his eyes. Say you're nothing. Bow. Laugh with us at yourself. Isn't that always the invitation? Harrow stuck out his hand. Firm shake, measured gaze. The kind of man who values neat columns, assets, liabilities, people. Unemployed is a harsh word, he said, half smile cutting one corner of his mouth. I'd say, between chapters? Between weather systems, I said. But I've always liked the rain. He blinked once. Something in his stare sharpened. Men like him are used to signals that confirm the map they already carry of you. When the signal deviates, they circle for a better reading. Piano was good, he said. Unexpected. Like a margin call, I replied. That earned the smallest tilt of his head. The groom didn't catch it. My daughter, standing a little behind her husband, caught everything and nothing at once. Her eyes were reddened and shining, not from champagne. She mouthed, I'm sorry again. I nodded. Forgiveness is a door. It opens, but the room beyond is sometimes unfurnished. Daniel, the groom said, too brightly, tell Mr. Harrow about, your situation. We've had a few laughs about it. Have you? I said softly. Ethan, my daughter whispered, warning in her voice. The groom Ethan winked at her as if fear and love were flavors he could stir. Harrow watched us with interest that bordered on impatience. He leaned closer, voice low. We have a lease review this quarter, Ethan. Don't relax yet. Then, to me, you live in town, Mr. Brooks. In a building in Jamaica Plain, I said. Brick. Drafty in winter. Generous in summer. It knows how to breathe. Poetic, he said. And I could hear the dismissal shaping in his mind. He patted Ethan's shoulder and drifted toward the bar, already bored. Ethan exhaled and let his smile collapse into a sneer he thought he kept hidden. You see? Now he met you. Happy? Ecstatic, I said. And do me a favor, he added, close to my ear, breath hot with gin. Don't make any more scenes. We have donors here, people who matter. Do I not? He let the question hang, ugly and useful. You already had your moment behind the piano. Be satisfied with that. I looked at my daughter. She was chewing the inside of her cheek, the way she did as a child when she'd lied about breaking something and wanted me to fix it without naming it. Ethan, she said, enough. He kissed her temple, a gesture of possession dressed as affection, and went off to work the room. The quartet resumed sterile and precise. The applause had been folded and put away. The evening wanted to right itself like a ship that had listed briefly, tantalizingly, toward a different horizon. I sat back at the piano bench and closed the lid. It thunked shut like a book. The hall refocused. A few guests approached, asked shy questions, left with fragments. Strangers' compliments of feathers. Pretty, weightless, liable to drift. My daughter stood near, not touching me, her expression a series of openings and closings. "Dad," she said, "can we talk later? Away from all this?" She gestured at the chandeliers, the money. "Later," I said. "Yes." But later has a talent for fleeing when summoned. A waiter whispered that the caterer wanted to see me in the kitchen. Odd, but kitchens are where truths sweat. I found the catering manager, Carmen, a woman with lines at the corners of her eyes from either smiling or squinting at ovens standing by a steel prep table, cluttered with half-carved roasts and sticky champagne flutes. "Mr. Brooks," she said, wiping her hands, "sorry to bother you. Your envelope is safe in the office fridge." "My what?" "The manila envelope," she said, dropping her voice as though the creme brulee could gossip. "You gave it to me an hour before the ceremony. Said I should keep it cold, that you'd ask for it later." I stared. Memory walks in circles at my age, but it doesn't stumble like that. "I didn't give you an envelope." She frowned. "Tall guy, nice suit. Said he was your messenger. Had your name written on it, D. Brooks." She tapped the stainless steel counter. Carmen doesn't confuse names. My stomach tightened like a fist. "Can I see it?" She vanished into the office and came back with a slick manila envelope beating with condensation, as if it had sweated secrets. My name was on the front in block letters that looked like a printer had learned to imitate a human hand. I slid a finger under the flap. Inside, a copy of my will. I knew every line of it. I'd revised it 2 months ago after a night of long thinking and cheap tea. I'd added clauses that were not generous, not cruel, but exacting. My modest investments. The apartment I owned outright. An account I'd fattened not with wages, but with years of careful, boring saving. And one asset no one knew I had because no one cared enough to imagine I could hold such a thing. The majority share in a small holding company that owned. Leases not glamorous, not on the cover of anything. But leases matter, don't they? The skeleton of every glossy venture is a lease. The holding company's crown jewel. A long-term sublease on a floor in a waterfront building occupied by a boutique fund with an appetite for risk. And a name designed to look good in lowercase. Ethan worked there. Harold ran it. The will in my hand was not the one in my desk at home. Pages had been inserted. Substitutions hid like tapeworms. I flipped until I found them. A clause amended to include my daughter's name tied to Ethan's by a hyphen that was not legal language, but felt like a shackle. In the event of my death, all voting shares in Durallen Holdings shall pass to my daughter, jointly administered with her husband, Ethan. I stopped. Someone had attempted to fold me into their math. Someone had mistaken my silence for vacancy. I understood suddenly the problem with invisibility. People get bold when they assume you cannot see them seeing you. "Carmen," I said, very calmly, "who gave you this?" She described him. Tall, tan, navy suit, the ocean color. The gait of a man used to rooms parting. "Thank you," I said. I slid the envelope back. "Keep it cold for 10 more minutes. If anyone else asks, you gave it to me and I dropped it. You're looking for it. You're flustered. You need to check the dumpsters. Will you do that for me?" She studied my face. "Is this trouble?" "Only if we let it be. You look like a man who has stopped letting things be." "Finally," I said. She nodded. 10 minutes. Go. I left the kitchen through the service corridor. On the wall hung a faded fire evacuation map under cracked plastic. The red "You Are Here" dot sat oddly close to the edge, as if the building itself admitted we were all one misstep from outside. I emerged near the coat room. Behind me, the column rose, patient and chipped. I touched its cool skin like the shoulder of a conspirator. "You've been holding this place up for a century," I whispered. "Hold it a little longer." The hall had shifted again while I was gone. Harrow stood near the head table, speaking quietly to the venue manager. "Papers." The manager's smile strained. Ethan laughed too loudly at something someone said and checked his watch twice in a minute. My daughter's face was pale now, the glow gone, like a bulb dimmed by a surge. I walked to the microphone. No one had asked me to speak. Years will teach you that invitation isn't always a courtesy. Sometimes it's a leash. I tapped the mic. A cough boomed across marble. "May I say a few words?" I asked the room, and I didn't wait for permission because I am an old man, and what can they do escort me out of my daughter's wedding? Perhaps they have done worse. The quartet hushed. Heads turned, curiosity tired but willing. Harrow's gaze slid over me and then stayed. He does not like variables on his floor. Thank you, I said. I'll be brief. I could feel every eye, even the ones that would later swear they hadn't watched at all. When my daughter was 5, I began and told them about Flower on Cheeks and Daddy's Tune, but only for a breath. Then I let the air change. And when she was 25, I continued. I stopped playing. Some of you will think that what I did tonight is the most important song I brought into this room. It isn't. I reached into my jacket, an old suit with a deeper pocket than its price suggested, and took out a second envelope. Real, dry. My envelope. I brought paper, I said. Ugly, necessary paper. A ripple of laughter, nervous, expectant. Ethan shifted, eyes narrowing. Harrow's lips tightened at the corners. Paper, he understands. This, I said, opening the envelope, is my will? Gasps. Tacky? Perhaps. The weddings already worship paperwork. Licenses, contracts, silent ledgers of who owes whom for favors. Why not add one more voice to the choir? I am tired of being talked around, I went on, so I will speak plainly. When I die, no one panic. Not tonight. I leave my daughter certain things. Not the world. Enough. But there is a condition I should name while the flowers are fresh. I could feel it then. The room leaning. The way fields lean when wind passes. The condition is not about money, I said. It is about stewardship. Respect, if you like honest words. I have seen what contempt does to a family. It hollows. It teaches the young that the old are obstacles, not architects. It teaches the strong that gentleness is weakness. I refuse to underwrite that. Ethan laughed once, a blade on tile. Is this about a column, Daniel? You're still on about the seating chart? Seating charts, I said, are maps of the soul. We draw where we think people belong. Harrow took a step forward. Mr. Brooks, perhaps this is not the setting. This is exactly the setting, I said, and my voice surprised me with its strength. A wedding is a choice made in public. So is a disrespect, silence, the kind that isn't a pause but a halt. In my will, I continued, there is a trust. It places assets into my daughter's hands alone. Sole control. I looked at her. You, Anna, not jointly, not with anyone else. You may, if you choose, appoint an advisor. You may, if you choose, invite your husband to advise. But you hold the pen. You carry the vote. Her face flushed. She put a hand to her throat, where a simple gold chain glinted like a small moon. Dad, she whispered. The trust also holds controlling interest in a small holding company, I said. A dull creature. It collects rent while people toast. It renews leases while brides dance. It has no taste for applause. I turned my eyes to Harrow. Durallen Holdings. His expression did not change. Men like him train their faces to be unmoving water. You can still see the fish below if you look. Tonight, I said, someone placed a refrigerated forgery of this will in a kitchen. I can only assume the intended reveal was later, when the room had softened with dessert. The forgery attempted to name joint control. It attempted to give the groom, a man who introduced me to his boss as unemployed, a hand on a lever that does not belong to him. A murmur surged. Faces pivoted to Ethan. He flushed the blotched red of a man who is miscounted. This is insane. Why would I? I held up my actual will. Because contempt breeds entitlement. You assume the old man can be rewritten. A clause added. A signature faked. He's behind a column. He won't notice. Harrow spoke then, quietly. Mr. Brooks, if this is about leases, we prefer to handle such matters on Monday, not at weddings. I bet you do, I said. But Monday is where people like me disappear in lobbies. Tonight the doors are open. I walked from the microphone toward the head table. Each step was a beat. I could have scored it. I placed the will down flat, the way you set a metronome before a lesson. I took out a pen as plain as the truth. This is my signature, I said, and signed the last page with a hand that did not shake. And this is a note. I lifted a single-page letter on Durallen letterhead to the board instructing that any lease renewal or renegotiation for tenants rated Echelon Harbor Partners. I let the name unfold. Into the air like a flagged ship, will require my explicit personal consent until such time as Anna Brooks wishes otherwise. Harrow's jaw twitched. Only once, but once was enough. Echelon Harbor Partners. Pretty in lowercase. Tendered to a lever. Sir, he said, and there was steel now. I trust you appreciate the reputational risk of games like this. I am not playing, I said. I'm describing the furniture. There is a column in this hall. It holds the roof. It is not photogenic. Remove it, and you host dinners in the open rain. I faced Ethan. You called me unemployed. You positioned me behind stone. You wanted my daughter to sign herself to you in every way that matters. Tonight is your chance to show me I misread you. He laughed, but it broke. You want me to what? Apologize? Bend the knee to your pride in front of all these people? No, I said. I want you to respect her. Not me. Her. Enough to stand up and say you do not speak for both of you when you speak of me. Enough to admit you used a word meant to shrink. Enough to promise you will never hide me again to gild your image. I let the silence hold. If you can do that, I will walk tomorrow to my lawyer and remove the instruction. Echelon will negotiate with a woman, not her shadow. If you cannot, we talk in corridors where the lighting is unflattering. The room made small sounds. A glass settling, a shoe scuffing, a throat clearing because truth dries the mouth. My daughter stared at Ethan as if waiting to see which creature would step out of him. He straightened, swallowed, smiled with every tooth. Of course, he said. Of course I respect Anna. Of course I respect you. If I said anything crass, it was a joke. You know how these events are, tensions, nerves. Ethan, Anna said. Apologize. He looked at her, surprise flaring as if a dog had quoted Keats. Honey, I just apologized to my father, she said. Her voice was not brittle now. It was the voice of a woman who'd been waiting too long to hear herself. Not to the room, not to your boss. To him. Harrow folded his arms. He had gone very still. The quartet, without encouragement, had stopped again. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, as if the electricity itself were listening. Ethan's face cycled smile, pout, threat, calculation, like a child flipping through masks. Daniel, he said finally, I'm sorry if you felt. No, I said. He blinked. What? Try again, I said. Jettison the conditional. I'm sorry, he said, and the words arrived flat, like bills folded by someone else. I was wrong. About what? He stared at me. He'd never had a teacher who forbade bluffing. He'd learned the world would accept the first draft if the font was expensive. About you, he said. About thinking you were. Less. I waited. Sometimes the air between two people is a kill. If you stay long enough, clay becomes a vessel. And I'm sorry, Anna, he added, turning to her, for asking your father to sit behind a column. Her breath caught. The room released. Just a little. Apologies are imperfect tools. They can still cut. I nodded. Thank you. He smiled, relieved, already calculating which joke would return the room to him. I put a hand up. One more thing, I said, and watched the hope drain from his face. The forgery. That was whoever. He glanced at Harrow as if blame were a baton he could pass. Harrow's stare did not accept it. I will not press charges, I said. We will say a courier erred. Carmen will forget a face. But any future attempts to alter my documents, to root around me because I'm old and quiet. I let the sentence stay unfinished. Some fences need only their post to warn. Don't mistake mercy for weakness. Harrow spoke at last, even, measured. Mr. Brooks, we will schedule time next week to discuss your instruction. With Anna, if she chooses. We are capable of respecting the column. Good, I said. He gave a minimal nod. For a moment, I almost liked him. He understood infrastructure. He might even have been a decent man who outsourced his decency to efficiency until it frayed. We all choose our failures. The room stirred the collective relief of danger receding. Laughter returned in careful peals. The band tried a standard and played it almost like it had a heart. People resumed being themselves, which is to say they resumed pretending. Anna stepped close. Dad, she whispered, you didn't have to. I did, I said. Not to punish him, to stop erasing myself. You grew up in the draft my silence made. I'm sorry for that. She pressed her forehead to mine. I remember the song, she said. I always did. There was so much noise. I know, I said. We stood like that, two people learning to hear each other in a hall full of applause we no longer needed. Over her shoulder, I saw Ethan, laughing too loudly with his friends again, already smoothing his feathers. Maybe he'd change. Maybe he wouldn't. If he didn't, my letter was ink, not a threat. Justice isn't a hammer. Sometimes it's a hinge. Later, much later, when the cake was a memory and the floor smelled of spilled champagne and wilting roses, I walked back to the column. The crack near its base showed white plaster against gray stone like a scar in winter. I pressed my palm against it, felt its coolness slip into my skin. Thank you, I said, for shelter, for weight, for the lesson. Outside, Boston had pulled on its night harbor wind with teeth, streetlights buzzing the soft insect prayer of electricity. I stood a moment on the steps, music leaking behind me, and breathed until the air stopped hurting. Carmen slipped out, handed me an empty manila envelope, grinned. Dumpster is clear, she said. Good, I said. Keep the oven warm. There will be more weddings. Oh yes, she said. Always more weddings. Always more paper. She went back inside. I walked down the steps slow, each footfall a quiet drumbeat. You want me to tell you it all ended tidy, that Ethan found humility and Harrow discovered a conscience and my daughter, and I never stumbled again? I won't. The cost of being seen is that you can no longer hide even from yourself. Visibility is a tax. It exposes the dust as much as the gold. But I will tell you this. The next morning, my phone lit with a message from Anna. No emojis. No apologies. Just 6 words that felt like spring's first warm breath through window screens. Bring the will. We'll read it. So I put the document in my old leather briefcase, the one I'd carried sheet music in when Chicago still called me by my first name, and I made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon. I hummed Daddy's tune under my breath and thought about kitchens and columns and how love is not a soft chair. It's a structure. It needs load-bearing honesty. It needs steel tucked under lace. Would you have done the same? Would you have risked being called cruel at your own child's wedding? Maybe you would have stayed behind the column. Maybe you would have sung and let the paper sleep. I don't blame you if you would. The world trains us to apologize for existing. I am done apologizing. And if there's a price, I will count it in daylight, with my name on every line. You think the story ended at the wedding, don't you? A man finds his voice, plays his song, waves his will like a banner, and all is set right. That would be merciful. That would be neat. But families are not neat, and the world has little mercy for men my age who dare to stand tall. Victory is never final. It only shifts the battlefield. The morning after, I sat at my small kitchen table in Jamaica Plain, sunlight spilling through blinds that rattled in the draft. The table still bore knife marks from years of hurried dinners. On it lay the will, the trust, the instruction to Durallen Holdings, all the papers that had turned a wedding into a reckoning. I poured coffee into my chipped Red Sox mug and waited for my daughter. She arrived just after 9, hair tied back, no veil, no makeup, only the face I remember from mornings when she was young and sleepy. She carried no husband at her side. Already that was a declaration. Dad, she said, kissing my cheek, can we read it? We spread the pages across the table. The paper smelled faintly of ink and old filing cabinets. She ran her fingers over the words, pausing at each clause. I didn't know, she whispered. All those years, I thought you had nothing. I had music, I said, and I had you. The rest I built slowly, brick by brick, while no one watched. Her eyes glistened. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to love me for the bricks. I wanted you to love me, even if all I had was the song. By noon, Ethan showed up. I knew he would. Men like him don't accept defeat. They reframe it. He came in without knocking, his tie loose, his eyes rimmed red from whiskey or shame, maybe both. Daniel, he said, forcing a smile, we should talk. Yesterday was dramatic. Let's not make permanent decisions based on a scene. Anna crossed her arms. It wasn't a scene. It was the truth. Ethan ignored her. He leaned toward me. Look, I admit, I handled things poorly. But you don't understand the stakes. Harrow, he's furious. Your little stunt with the will embarrassed him in front of investors. If those leases tighten, he'll take it out on me. On us. Then maybe you should consider another profession, I said. His jaw tightened. I married your daughter, Daniel. We're family. That trust, you can't cut me out of it. I didn't cut you out, I said. I left it to Anna. You're welcome to earn her trust, but not to steal mine. Anna's voice shook but held. Ethan, stop. He's right. You tried to rewrite him out of his own life. You tried to rewrite me too. Sweetheart. No, she said. You hid him. You hid me. The silence after that was sharper than any insult. Ethan stared at her as though she'd slipped from a role he had written for her. He turned to me, searching for an ally he would never find. Finally, he spat. This isn't over. No, I said softly. It's just beginning. That week, Harrow's office called. Not his assistant Harrow himself. His voice was steady, but beneath it lay a current of unease. Mr. Brooks, we'd like to discuss the terms of that instruction. Perhaps over lunch? Perhaps, I said, but my daughter will attend. The pen is hers. Silence. Then, very well. The following Tuesday, Anna and I sat across from Harrow at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. The water slapped against pylons below, restless, insistent. Harrow ordered oysters. Anna ordered tea. I ordered nothing but water. Let's be pragmatic, Harrow said. That instruction complicates matters. Investors dislike uncertainty. Remove it, and we can ensure your daughter and her husband are, well, taken care of. Anna's hands tightened around her teacup. You mean controlled, protected, Harrow corrected. His smile never touched his eyes. I leaned forward. You mistake us, Mr. Harrow. We don't need your protection. We need your respect. For the first time, his expression flickered. Just a crack. But I saw it, the recognition that he had miscalculated. That the quiet man behind the column was not silent anymore. And that his daughter, once pliant, now held the pen. The months that followed were uneasy. Ethan tried to charm his way back into Anna's favor, but every attempt rang hollow. The truth of the forgery hovered like smoke he couldn't clear. By spring, she told him she wanted space. By summer, she filed for annulment. At night, when I played the piano in my apartment, the neighbors didn't complain. Sometimes they left their windows open. Sometimes I heard applause drift across the courtyard. Music had returned, not to smoky bars, not to glory days, but to me. One evening, Anna came by carrying a small box. I found this in Mom's things, she said, handing it over. Inside lay a cassette tape, dated the week of her birth. In my handwriting, for Anna Daddy's tune. We sat together, listening on my old player. The sound crackled, fragile as tissue, but the melody was the bright, raw, alive. She cried. I did too. Dad, she whispered, I'll never hide you again. And Ethan? Last I heard, he left Boston, chasing another job in another city. A man still searching for rooms where he could control the seating chart. Maybe he'll find them. Maybe he won't. But he'll never forget the night the old man stepped out from behind the column and turned the room with a single song. As for me, I keep the will in a drawer, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. Paper matters, yes, but so does presence. The column still stands in that wedding hall, cracked but steady. And when I close my eyes, I can still feel my hand against its cool surface. Still hear myself whisper, hold it a little longer. Now, when I play, I don't play for applause. I play so the silence doesn't win. And if you ever feel yourself pushed aside, hidden behind stone, remember this. Sometimes the most radical act is simply to be seen. To press a key, to let the note ring out until the whole room has no choice but to listen. Because once they hear you, truly hear you, they can never unhear you again. Stories matter. They shape who we are. They remind us we're not alone. If this story touched you, imagine the ones still waiting to be told. Subscribe, and don't just watch, be part of this journey. Thank you.